Yo, what's going on YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. Alright, so it's your boy Kevin Forte. We are taking a look today at the Pittsburgh Penguins as they've hired Ron Hextall and Brian Burke as the management of the Pittsburgh Penguins moving forward. What does this mean for the Pittsburgh Penguins? What is the future for the Penguins? We're going to be taking a look at what they may do. We're going to be looking at all of that in the nitty-gritty here for the Pittsburgh Penguins in this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and even bigger subscribe down below. Let's take a look at the future of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, it was a big day for the Pittsburgh Penguins. After 13 days ago, they let go of Jim Rutherford as the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Since then, 2 weeks later, they have hired Ron Hextall to be the next general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins and Brian Burke as the president of hockey operations for the said Pittsburgh Penguins. So, what does this mean for the Penguins? Because right now, you're looking at a team that is just on the cusp of the playoffs right now. They're right on the cusp with the New York Islanders as that last spot in the East Division. The Pittsburgh Penguins have come out of the gate kind of slow. They aren't that bad. People are saying, oh, Pittsburgh's terrible, this and that. They aren't that bad. They're 5-5-1 to start the season. Their goaltending has not been that good, and we have seen a decline in Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. So who's to say by the end of this season that doesn't get picked up, at least in one of those categories, whether the goaltending gets better or the two-headed monster in Crosby and Malkin starts producing a little bit more. But there is some concern in Pittsburgh. Now, the problem is Pittsburgh's in a really tough division. The division of death, I like to call it. You've got the Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins, and the Philadelphia Flyers, who I think at this point have pretty much locked up a playoff spot in that East Division, barring a crazy unknown event, which based off of last year is possible, but we're just saying here, those top three spots are locked up. Now you've got the fourth spot, where you have a bunch of teams that think they can get in the postseason. Those teams are, who's in it right now? The New York Islanders. Right on the outside looking in is the Pittsburgh Penguins, the New Jersey Devils, the Buffalo Sabres, and the New York Rangers. Now, the more realistic side of things, I'm going to say right now, it is the Islanders and the Penguins. But not too far behind is Jersey, the Rangers, and Buffalo. So, it's a tough division. Every team in this division is looking to compete. None of them are in a quote-unquote rebuild right now, except possibly Pittsburgh. Maybe not right this second, but we'll get into that. So, Ron Hextall, who will be the next general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, taking over Jim Rutherford's job. Ron Hextall played 13 seasons in the NHL, most notably in his time with the Philadelphia Flyers, but he also played with the Quebec Nordiques and the New York Islanders. He served as an assistant general manager for the Flyers for one season before taking over from Paul Holmgren in May of 2014 as the next general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers. He held this position for 4.5 seasons before getting let go in 2019. Before his time, though, in Philadelphia, he was an assistant general manager for the Los Angeles Kings, where he won the Stanley Cup in 2012. On the other side, for Brian Burke, a pretty solid career in management for him. Brian Burke was the general manager of the Hartford Whalers, Vancouver Canucks, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was also in a president of hockey operations role in Calgary, which is the same role he will be retaining in Pittsburgh. The only thing is there, too, in Anaheim, he did win a Stanley Cup in 2007. Burke was also the general manager for the U.S. national men's ice hockey team for the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver and is a member of the Rugby Canada's board of directors. We don't care that much about that. Brian Burke gets another opportunity. This is great news for him. You look at what he's done. I mean, obviously things in Hartford haven't worked out because they're no longer in Hartford. They're in Carolina. But you look at the other places he went to. Vancouver, he did a pretty good job in Vancouver, helped them, through some rough times and kind of, to try and win a championship. They did win a championship with the Anaheim Ducks. A big reason I'm a Ducks fan to this day. Adding some of those big guys to that team. Accomplishing guys, bringing in Teemu Solani and Paul Correa, as well as some of the other guys on that Ducks team. He was a big part of that. And obviously managing guys like Scotty Niedermayer. So, obviously there was a pretty big importance for Brian Burke at that time. You look what he did in Toronto, a Toronto Maple Leafs team that was nothing. They ended up going into a rebuild after Brian Burke. But let's be honest, they were trying to win it. When they were trying to bring in Brian Burke, they were at the bottomest most pit ever. They had nothing before Brian Burke. They were able to bring in a couple of guys like Joffrey Lupul from the Anaheim Ducks. They were also able to bring in other guys along the way, guys like Phil Kessel. It didn't work out, but it was the beginning of the era that we have today. It was the bridge between the Toronto Maple Leafs now to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of that can be, you could thank a lot of that from Brian Burke. So, this is a situation where he's trying to win now. And that's what we've seen Brian Burke do in his time in Vancouver, in his time in Calgary, in his time in Toronto, as well as in Anaheim. He's a win-now general manager, and we're going to see that. He's more of an old-school guy, obviously, so don't be surprised if the Pittsburgh Penguins get a little bit bigger, if he has some say in that regard. There's been talk that maybe his like or dislike for certain players has already been out there, but again, now that he's in the room, it's going to change. They're going to wait and see what everything looks like in Pittsburgh before they make any big decisions. Now, Ron Hextall was asked about the situation with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Would he consider trading those guys out? And he was very mute on that point, basically saying, well, I'm not planning on trading them, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I wouldn't trade them either. So this is something we're going to see, over the summer. Don't be surprised if Pittsburgh stays pretty quiet going into the trade deadline, unless things are in dire shape where they really think they can make the playoffs and they have the assets and they have the right guys available that they want. Don't be surprised if Pittsburgh makes more moves in the offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw stuff in the offseason for Pittsburgh. You got to think that the base players around this team are the future. I hate to say it. It's guys like Marcus Pettersson, guys like Jake Gensel up front. It's going to be a very different Pittsburgh Penguins team as Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin get older. And as they've gotten older, we're seeing that their production has slowed down. And the problem is the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, especially with guys like, Samuel Poulin going back to the QMJHL, he was a prized prospect in Pittsburgh, and they are not, they have not been hitting their targets with these prospects. And that's been a big problem for Pittsburgh, is as these guys like Crosby and Malkin and Letang start to go down in their, production, nobody is there to step up and take that. And usually that's in a rookie role, which the Pittsburgh Penguins have been lacking. And let's also not forget that the Pittsburgh Penguins goaltending has changed a lot since their championships back in the day when they had Marc-Andre Fleury, and now Matt Murray is out the door as well. It's Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith, a much younger, more inexperienced, let's be honest, the more important thing, the cheaper goaltending tandem right now, and that seems to be affecting Pittsburgh a little bit as well. Obviously, there was a lot going on with Jim Rutherford. Everybody forgets this part too. Jim Rutherford, when he came into this job with Pittsburgh, when they were winning championships, look at the assistants that he had. Jason Botterill before he went to Buffalo. We saw Ray Shero. Ray Shero left a bunch of guys here for Jim Rutherford. Like I said, guys like Jason Botterill, very important in terms of the cap and stuff like that. Jason Botterill was more in the finances and business side of the game. And then you also had guys like Bill Guerin and, what's the other guy's name that went to Jersey? Tom Fitzgerald. Tom Fitzgerald and Bill Guerin were both very important in the player evaluation and the amateur side of things for the Pittsburgh Penguins. You look at where those guys are now. Jason Botterill is an assistant general manager with the Seattle Kraken, the new expansion team. Bill Guerin, the general manager of the Minnesota Wild. And Tom Fitzgerald is the general manager of the New Jersey Devils. So that kind of left Jim Rutherford in a spot where it was kind of his job at that point. Now, he did have Patrick Alvin as well as Trevor Daley, but they are still very new on the scene, and they aren't as experienced as guys like Bill Guerin, Tom Fitzgerald, and Jason Botterill. So those guys leaving the organization definitely left a gaping hole for Pittsburgh. And not to mention, with all this stuff going on with COVID and the taxi squad and the farm system, there was a lot that Jim Rutherford had to learn on the fly. And not to mention, his team isn't getting any younger, and that's only making things more difficult. And maybe that's why we've been starting to see those weird trades with Jim Rutherford, like the Michael Matheson trade over the summer, because he didn't have guys like Tom Fitzgerald and Bill Guerin and Jason Botterill to kind of help keep him on track. So, good news though for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're in win now mode, it seems like. Unless something crazy happens and a meteor strikes, I think Pittsburgh for the next 2-3 years, this is their window, if it even lasts that long. And then the question is, from that point, where do you move forward? Do you maybe look in another direction in 3 years from now? Maybe that's what Pittsburgh does, but I have to admit, I like what we've seen here from Brian Burke and Ron Hextall. Obviously, Ron Hextall, the infamous Broad Street Bullies goaltender, the goalie that fights in Philly, and now he's going down the road. He's heading west to Pittsburgh. So a little bit interesting there. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Pittsburgh Penguins hiring Brian Burke as the president of hockey operations and Ron Hextall, the Philadelphia Flyers trader, going to become the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and even bigger subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching, and let's go Penguins.